All right, let's dive into some serious vocabulary, shall we? We're going deep today.
Yeah, today we're cracking open the Oxford 5000 Advanced Vocabulary.
Ooh, exciting.
We're looking specifically at, let's see, Group 36, words 1051 to 1080. Get ready. Your English is about to get a major upgrade.
It really is like leveling up, isn't it? Like in a language learning game.
Totally.
The more words you have, the more you can express yourself.
Exactly.
The more you can understand.
I like that. Level up. I'm going to use that.
Steal it.
Okay. First word on our list. Legendary. What makes something legendary?
Well, you know, when something is legendary, it's not just like famous, right? It's iconic. It's the kind of thing that people will be talking about for years and years to come.
Okay.
I mean, think about figures like Nelson Mandela.
Oh, yeah.
Or stories like the Odyssey. They've kind of transcended time and culture.
They become almost mythical.
Almost mythical.
Yeah, okay, I love that. So it's
Yeah.
not just famous, it's like stood the test of time.
Yes. People still talk about it. Okay, so how about some examples of how we might use legendary in a sentence?
Sure.
I've got a few.
Okay.
Jimi Hendrix is considered a legendary guitarist. Would you agree?
Definitely.
The restaurant's legendary chocolate cake was worth every calorie.
Ooh, I like that one.
Okay. Her bravery during the war made her a legendary figure.
You know, it's interesting. Legendary can be used for good or bad. You could have a legendary villain
Oh, that's true.
just as much as you can have a legendary hero.
That's a good point. Okay, so be careful how you use legendary. Now we've got a trio of words that can be a bit tricky.
Yeah.
Legislation, legislative, and legislature. They all have to do with making laws,
Yeah.
but they have slightly different meanings.
Right. It's a bit like a recipe. Legislation is the finished dish, the actual law itself.
Okay, the law, got it.
Then you have legislative, which describes anything related to making those laws, like a legislative council, for example. And then you've got the legislature, which is like the chef in the kitchen, the body, that actually creates those laws.
So the legislature makes the legislation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I like that analogy. All right, so how about some example sentences? For legislation, we could say the new legislation bans single-use plastics.
Right, makes sense.
For legislative, we could say the legislative process can be slow and complicated, which is very true. And for legislature, we could say the legislature voted to increase funding for education.
Understanding these terms is so important for anyone who wants to follow what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
You know, in the news, in politics.
It helps you understand the news.
Definitely.
Because a lot of times they use those words.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So those are three important words if you're following, current events. All right, next up, we have legitimate. Legitimate means lawful, acceptable, or genuine.
It's all about being valid and real.
Real.
Authentic.
Okay, so for example, he had a legitimate excuse for being late. His car broke down. Hopefully that's true.
Hopefully.
We need to ensure we're getting information from legitimate sources. So true these days.
Very true.
And the protesters had legitimate grievances. Okay, so again, it has to be real. It has to be something that's actually true. It's not made up.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on to lengthy, which simply means long. We often use this word to describe something that seems to go on forever. A long, long time. Like a meeting, maybe.
Or those Zoom calls that never seem to end.
Oh, yeah. Or a movie that could have been, an hour shorter.
Yes.
So, for example, the meeting was so lengthy that everyone was exhausted by the end.
I've been there.
She wrote a lengthy email explaining her decision. The novel's lengthy descriptions made it a bit of a slog. So if something's lengthy, it can be a little bit boring because it's just like going on and on and on.
And it's funny because what's lengthy to one person might be just right for another.
That's true.
So it's all relative.
Okay. Speaking of perspective, our next word is lens. Now, this is a word that can be both literal and figurative.
Right.
So literally, a lens is something that helps us see.
Like in glasses or in a camera.
In a camera, exactly.
But then figuratively, we talk about viewing things through a certain lens.
Right.
And that just means your point of view.
Right.
How you see the world.
Yeah. So how about some examples? The photographer adjusted the lens to capture the perfect shot. That's a literal lens.
Literal.
She viewed the situation through the lens of her own upbringing.
Figurative.
Let's analyze this problem using a historical lens. So there we're looking back at history to try to understand something. Okay, so lens can be literal or figurative.
It reminds us that there's always more than one way to see things.
Always. Okay. Moving on to lesbian. This word refers to a woman who is attracted romantically or sexually to other women. It's an important term for understanding, different sexual orientations and identities.
And like any other descriptor of identity, it's important to use it respectfully.
Very respectfully and accurately.
Accurately.
Okay. The author is a well-known lesbian activist. The movie features a lesbian love story that challenges stereotypes, and many lesbian couples are choosing to have families. All right, so again, be very respectful when using that word. Next up, we have lesser, which means smaller, less important, or lower quality. It's often used for comparisons.
Right, so you might choose the lesser of two evils.
Well, that's a good one.
Or you might settle for a lesser-known brand.
If it's cheaper.
Yeah, if it's more affordable.
Okay. So, for example, they were convicted of a lesser charge. The company played a lesser role in the project. He opted for a lesser-known tourist destination to avoid the crowds. So, lesser means it's not as important or not as big or not as famous.
It often implies some kind of hierarchy.
Like a ranking.
A ranking, yes.
Okay. Now for a word that's pretty serious. Lethal. Lethal means deadly.
Capable of causing death.
Yeah, you don't want to mess around with something that's lethal.
Definitely not.
So you might hear this word in the news.
Yeah, you might hear it when they're talking about an accident.
An accident, yeah.
Or a crime.
A crime. A dangerous substance.
Definitely.
Okay, so the venom of the black mamba snake is highly lethal.
Very lethal.
The authorities are investigating a case of lethal force. And he warned of the lethal consequences of ignoring safety protocols. So again, be very careful. If something is lethal, it can kill.
Yeah.
Switching gears a bit, our next word is liable, which has legal implications.
It means you're legally responsible for something.
Responsible.
Yeah. So a company might be liable for damages if their product is defective.
Okay.
Or a homeowner could be liable if somebody gets injured on their property.
Yeah, so the court found the driver liable for the accident.
Right.
Parents are liable for their children's actions in certain situations. Make sure you have insurance to protect yourself from liability.
It's all about understanding, what you're responsible for.
Your rights and responsibilities.
Exactly.
Okay, now on to liberal. This is a tricky word because it can have a few different meanings depending on the context.
It definitely depends on the context.
So it can refer to someone who is open-minded and tolerant.
Right.
Or it can describe a political ideology.
A political ideology that really emphasizes individual freedoms and social justice.
Right. Okay, so for example, my grandparents have a very liberal attitude towards dating. That means they're pretty open-minded.
Yeah, very open-minded.
She is a member of the Liberal Party.
There you go, political ideology.
The country has a liberal constitution that guarantees freedom of speech.
It reflects how complicated things can be.
Yeah, so you've got to be careful with that word.
Be careful, pay attention to the context.
Pay attention to the context. Okay, good. And speaking of complex things, our next word is liberation, which means the act of being set free from oppression or control. So you're no longer oppressed. You're no longer controlled. You're free.
It often comes up when we talk about social and political movements.
Movements, yeah. Like the liberation of Paris from Nazi occupation was a pivotal moment in World War II.
A very important moment.
The women's liberation movement fought for equality in all aspects of life. The prisoners rejoiced at their newfound liberation. So that idea of freedom.
It's powerful, isn't it? That yearning for freedom.
Yeah. And that brings us to a related word, liberty. Liberty is the state of being free.
Free from oppressive restrictions.
Yeah, restrictions. So think of like fundamental freedoms, like the right to free speech.
The right to assembly.
To assemble,
The
exactly.
foundations of a democratic society.
Okay, so they fought bravely for liberty and justice. The Constitution guarantees the liberty to practice one's religion freely. She longed for the liberty to travel the world. So that's liberty. Now let's shift gears to license. License can be a noun or a verb.
Two parts of speech there.
Two parts of speech. As a noun, it's an official document that gives you permission to do something.
To drive, to hunt, to sell certain product.
As a verb, it means to give someone that permission.
Right.
Okay, so for example, I need to renew my driver's license before it expires.
Very important.
The restaurant is licensed to serve alcohol. The software is licensed under a free-to-use agreement. So you have permission to use it.
It's about making sure that things are done properly, that people meet certain standards.
Okay, standards, yeah.
To regulation.
Regulations, yeah. Speaking of things that last a long time, we have two words that are similar. Lifelong and lifetime.
Lifelong means something lasts for your whole life.
Your whole life, yeah.
Lifetime refers to how long a person's life is.
The duration of your life.
Yeah.
Okay, so lifelong, for example. He's been a lifelong fan of the team. She had a lifelong passion for learning. They formed a lifelong bond during their childhood. And lifetime. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Don't miss those.
Don't miss those. He achieved more in his lifetime than most people could dream of.
Wow.
And the warranty on this appliance is valid for the lifetime of the product.
It's all about time and how it shapes us.
Yeah. Okay, now let's brighten things up a bit with the word lighting. Lighting refers to the way lights are arranged in a space.
Think about how different a room can feel.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on the lighting.
Depending on the lighting.
You know, you have those harsh fluorescent lights in an office.
Yeah.
And then you have the warm glow of candlelight in a restaurant.
It makes a huge difference.
It's different.
Okay, so how about some examples? The lighting in the photograph was stunning, creating a sense of drama.
Beautiful.
The stage lighting changed dramatically throughout the performance. He installed dimmable lighting in the living room to create a cozy ambiance.
So yeah, lighting can make a big difference in the mood and atmosphere of a space.
Huge. Now for a word that's all about probability. Likelihood. Likelihood refers to the chance of something happening.
How likely is it?
How likely of it, yeah. So you might talk about the likelihood of rain.
Or the likelihood of winning a lottery.
Yeah. Or the likelihood of, you know, a certain candidate winning an election. Okay. So the meteorologist predicted a high likelihood of snow tomorrow.
I hope they're wrong.
There's a very low likelihood of winning the jackpot, unless you're really lucky. And the doctor explained the likelihood of a full recovery. So again, it's just, you know, how likely is something to happen. Okay, and speaking of things that are smooth and easy, we have the word likewise. Likewise means in the same way or similarly.
You use it to show agreement.
Agreement.
Or to draw a parallel.
Okay, so I enjoyed the book, and likewise the movie was excellent.
Perfect example.
She was kind to me, and I treated her likewise. Exercise is good for your body, and likewise, meditation is beneficial for your mind.
I like that one.
He worked hard, and likewise, his efforts were rewarded. Okay, good. So likewise just means in the same way. Let's stretch our vocabulary muscles a bit with the word limb.
Ooh, I feel the stretch.
Usually when we talk about a limb, we're talking about an arm or a leg.
But you can also use it metaphorically
Okay.
to talk about a branch of a tree.
Oh, interesting.
It kind of connects us to nature a little bit.
I like that.
Yeah.
So, for example, she broke a limb while skiing. Ouch. The monkey swung effortlessly from limb to limb, and the storm damaged several limbs of the old oak tree. Okay, so limb can be an arm, a leg, or a branch of a tree. And speaking of vulnerability, our next word is limitation, meaning a restriction or a weakness.
We all have them, right?
We all have limitations.
Physical, mental, you know.
Circumstantial.
Yeah. But it's good to recognize them.
It is.
That's how you grow.
Okay, so for example, the study had some limitations that may have skewed the results.
Uh-huh.
She acknowledged her limitations and asked for help. It's always good to ask for help.
It is.
And despite its limitations, the invention was groundbreaking.
Okay.
So limitations can sometimes be overcome.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Let's line up our next word. Lineup. This usually refers to a group of people or things arranged in a row.
Like a police lineup.
Oh, a police lineup.
You see those on TV. Or, you could have a lineup of bands at a music festival.
Oh, a lineup of bands. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so the festival boasted an impressive lineup of international artists. The coach announced the starting lineup for the game, and the witness was asked to identify the perpetrator for the police lineup. Okay, so that's a lineup. Things are lined up in a row.
Nice and orderly.
Orderly. Now, for a word that keeps things straightforward, linear. Linear means arranged in a straight line or progressing step by step.
So it could describe a physical arrangement like a row of houses.
Okay.
Or it could describe something more abstract like a timeline of events.
Okay. So the students learned about history in a linear fashion, starting with ancient civilizations.
Step by step.
Step by step. The plot of the movie was very linear, with no unexpected twists. So it was a very predictable movie, maybe.
Maybe a little boring.
Maybe a little boring. The graph showed a linear relationship between the two variables. Okay, so that's linear. Straightforward, step by step. And speaking of things that tend to stick around, our next word is linger, meaning to stay longer than expected or to persist.
I love how a smell can linger in a room.
Oh, yeah.
Like a really good smell.
Like baking cookies.
Baking cookies, yes.
Or how a memory can linger.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Long after the event has passed.
Yeah.
Okay, so some more examples. The guests lingered after dinner, enjoying each other's company, so they didn't want to leave.
They were having a good time.
The feeling of sadness lingered long after she had left. The aroma of coffee lingered in the air, so that smell was still there.
I can almost smell it now.
Okay, good. Linger. Now for a word that helps us stay organized. Listing.
It's all about making lists.
Making lists.
Yeah.
And a listing is usually written or printed.
You could have a shopping list.
A shopping list, yeah.
A to-do list.
Or a list of houses for sale. Okay. She checked off each item on her list as she completed the tasks. The real estate agent showed her a listing of homes in her price range. The online marketplace has a listing of products from various sellers.
Lists can make life so much easier.
They really can. It's a good way to stay organized. And speaking of order, let's look at two words that are easy to mix up. Literacy and literally.
Okay. Literacy is the ability to read and write. A very important skill.
A very important skill.
Literally, on the other hand, means something is actually true.
Actually true.
You're not exaggerating.
Not exaggerating.
It happened exactly as you said.
Okay, got it. So literacy examples. The organization promotes literacy programs in underserved communities, so helping people learn to read and write. Early childhood literacy is crucial for a child's development, and improved literacy rates can lead to economic growth. So very important for society. And literally, I was literally shaking with excitement. Not figuratively, you were actually shaking.
Actually shaking.
The music was so loud that the floor was literally vibrating.
Wow.
And she literally saved my life.
Yeah.
So it actually happened.
It's funny because sometimes people use literally just to emphasize something. Even if it's not, 100% literally true.
Yeah, like I'm literally dying of laughter.
Right.
Wow.
Okay, but in these examples, we're using it to mean that it actually happened. All right. Last but not least, we have literary, which means related to literature or writing.
You might talk about literary genres.
Literary genres, okay.
Literary criticism.
Literary criticism, yeah.
Literary technique.
She had a deep appreciation for literary classics. The novel was praised for its sophisticated literary style, and he pursued a career in literary academia. So anything related to literature or writing.
Exactly.
Okay. And that brings us to the very last word on our list. Liter. This is a unit of measurement.
For volume.
Per volume, okay.
Usually liquids. Liquids, yeah. The recipe calls for 1 liter of water. The car's gas tank holds 50 liters. And I try to drink at least 2 liters of water a day.
Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated. And just a little note. The spelling of this word can be different in American English and British English.
Right. In American English, it's liter, L-I-T-E-R.
And in British English, it's liter, L-I-T-R-E. So just be aware of that. Wow, we covered a lot of ground today. 30 words. That's a lot of new vocabulary.
It is, but remember the key is to use them.
To use them, yeah.
Try writing a paragraph, using a few of these words.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Or just sprinkle them into your conversations.
Yeah.
The more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
Exactly. So what does all this mean for you, our listeners?
It means you're well on your way to mastering English.
That's right. And who knows, maybe one day you'll be writing legendary works of literature.
Maybe.
Thanks for joining us on this vocabulary journey.